Okay, so
Rants are always good.
this is my issue. Is anybody watching the show Once Upon a Time? Have you seen
Yes.
this?
Yes.
Wait, who's that?
That's my wife in the background who's
Hey,
saying,
how you doing? You're watching Once Upon a Time. Excellent. Awesome. Yeah, okay, so my daughter is obsessed, literally obsessed, and has spent like the last part of the summer catching up on every single episode, and pretty much timed it perfectly to where she was there, and the first episode was this past week. And are you familiar with it, Mike, at all? Do you know what it's like?
I've never heard of it.
Okay, so it's
So I'm no help here.
It's to call it a Disney vehicle would be very much understating the fact that it's a Disney vehicle.
I see.
For
Are they
everything
doing
possible.
Frozen tonight?
What was that?
Aren't they doing Frozen tonight?
Well, yeah, that's what they did this past week. They brought in Frozen. Now, this is my little rant here, briefly. Frozen is the biggest sham of all Disney things ever put together. Okay, this
don't say that to my
particular
kids.
show is okay. Now, this movie came out, and they were hyping it like this is the best thing since Lion King, right? This is incredible. And what Frozen is, and I may have said this before, and if I have, I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but I'm getting old. What Frozen is nothing more than they said, we need a new musical. But before we do a new musical on Broadway, we got to pretend it's a movie. And we're going to do a movie. We're going to make a movie about, and we're going to make this very loose plot. We've got this great song, and we're going to use this great song, and we're going to build this entire thing around this, right? And they're put out, so in like Lion King was a musical, a very popular musical, but it was first a very good movie, right? So you got Frozen. So now they put Frozen out. And Frozen is, Disney, very Disney, and it's got great music, but it has no story to it. Like really, there is no protagonist, antagonist. I don't understand what Frozen is about. We've watched it several times. The music is great. There's no angst in it. Of course, a parent dies because it's Disney and that's the law. But besides that, everything is just the way it goes. Right? So
Disney hates parents.
Right. So now we've been watching Once, and I started getting into it too because it's interesting. It's got, it's a story. If you haven't followed before, it's a story of it's a little town in Maine that is actually full of classic fairy tale characters and story characters who have been somehow transformed to this town in Maine and don't remember who they were before. So you have like Snow White, and you have I guess maybe they do now, but that was the whole gist of it. Okay. So they have Snow White, Rumpelstiltskin. They've got Cinderella. You've got Prince Charming. You're the Wicked Witch of the West. I think the Wizard of Oz is somehow connected to this. I don't even think that was Disney, but maybe they bought it. There's probably a platypus somewhere coming up soon from Perry the Platypus. There's all sorts. They're putting every Disney thing everything at the wall they can, right? So
it sounds like a Disney version of the show Survivor.
Sort of, but it's actually a good story, and they did a pretty good job with it. Like the whole seems to be around Cinderella, who is Snow White and Prince Charming's kid. That's what I gather from it, because I've seen it.
Brother.
Correct me if I'm wrong about that. So that's the story. So then this week they bring in one of the Frozen characters. Now, until now, all the characters have been basically classic vintage Disney characters. It's not like that's our pet fish Nemo. It's just they have had classic Disney characters, right? Now they bring in the Frozen girl. So she shows up in this town of Maine and creates a snow monster. Okay, right out of the cartoon. And now there will be a new line in the future that will misplace jumping the shark, which will mean creating a snow monster. Because creating a snow monster is my definition of something that's just gone completely awry. So they take this right out of.
And next week, the Heat Miser.
Right. If Disney bought that, they would put it in there too. And it's just so Frozen. This is again part of my theory that Frozen is a scam that they're trying to make into something bigger than it is.
Well, I can prove that it's a scam act because a friend of mine whose daughter is celebrating her birthday, I asked what I could get her for her birthday, and they said a Frozen doll.
Yeah.
And the Frozen doll was $80, and I'm I am not spending $80 on a Frozen doll. Sorry.
That's Disney, right? That's Disney in a nutshell. And God help us this Halloween when we're going to be visited by 1,000 Frozen characters in a few weeks.
Well, I was one of those ones that spent $80 on.
There you go, right? So it's completely.
Sucker.
I'm telling you. So this is how it goes, right? So anyway, that is my little rant. Just be honest with us, Disney. Just be honest. I mean, what you're doing here is anyway. That's all I want to say. So, but let's move.
That's Disney.
Wait, no.
Not Johnny Manziel. It's Disney.
Someone says Frozen's plot is more complex.
That was the most unusual opening to a hockey show ever in the history of time.
And here is the nuts thing. Ready for this, Kevin? Disney will put anything on ice, but there's no Frozen on ice. I mean, they have Toy Story on ice. There has been, Nemo on ice, which would kill the fish. There's all sorts of things, but Frozen, the one thing that actually has to do with ice and snow. Anyway, just that is the beginning of the show. It's October 1st, kids. Proud of myself for knowing the date.
Are we doing the intro, Ak?
I'll start. We're going to do the intro.
Is it October yet?
Yes.
Oh, that's right, it is.
Mike, then Josh, then Kevin? Or Mike,
Yep.
then, yeah. Mike, then Josh.
Is that the
Mike.
slogan this year, by the way, with the NHL? Is it October yet? Because that's all the teams have been tweeting the last month.
No, it is the slogan, and yet, still preseason. Anyway, okay, here we go. Okay. All right. Hello, Hockey World. It is Wednesday. It's October 1st, 2014.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Kevin Allen.
I'm Josh Riber.
And I should have been more distinct, but I think, Josh, that worked well. And I'm Eklund, and that's Kevin Allen from the USA Today. How you doing, Kev?
Doing great. Glad to be back.
Excellent, excellent. No, me too. It's so today's our last show of we went through the entire summer, and Mike and I decided when we first started this podcast we were going to do it for a couple weeks. Remember, at the end of the playoffs, and then we were going to maybe do it once a week. And you guys really watched it so much that we said, okay, we're going to try to do it every friggin' day through a summer where there's no sport. And we did it, Mike. We did it. We got through. So today is our last structured show because tomorrow we're going to start previews. We're going to do the Pacific Division, and which I always call Specific Division. But we're going to do specifically the Pacific Division, and and then we're off. We're off to the races. It's awesome. So anyway, but so Joffrey Lupul, Mike, tweets out something last night that got the whole hockey world a buzz, and it's just so funny how a player, can tweet something like this, and who knows, he might have had a couple wings, a beer or two, and then just suddenly decides, what does he tweet out, Mike?
Well, he was commenting on the Major League wild card game between the Kansas City Royals and the Oakland A's, and he tweeted out, and I'm trying to find it in my... Here we go. Better ball games. Someone tell me why the NHL doesn't have a playoff between the 8th and 9th seeds. Anyone? Question mark. And the funny thing is, Zach, if you remember, there were rumors when the lockout was going on that one of the settlements, and it was out there for a little bit, and then it just got shot down. That one of the possibilities was to expand the playoff pool to 20 teams and have some sort of single game or 3-game series type elimination. It was there for like a second, and then I think it was Nick Kiprios from Sportsnet who reported it, and then it just dropped off completely. But if you think about it, and you look at the excitement that has been generated in Major League Baseball, last night it was a extra inning 1-run game between Kansas City and Oakland. There might be some interest, there might be some benefit to that, but I'm not sure how likely it is.
Well, he wants someone to tell us, Kevin, so you tell us why.
Well, I don't have a good answer because I actually like it. I remember specifically when that was being talked about, expanding the playoffs, and you will find people on both sides on that, and a lot of fans believe there's too many teams already in the playoffs. I'm certainly not among them, but I say the more the merrier. And what's interesting is it really wouldn't be all that disruptive for a team, at least a lot less so than it is for a baseball team. And for a baseball team, a 1-game playoff, it throws off your whole rotation, and it changes what you are as you move forward. I mean, if you use your best pitcher in that wild card game, and then when you enter the next series, you're down to your number 2 against their number 1, and it disrupts everything. So it's much more disruptive, but they see the value in the excitement level of a single game elimination. And the response in the baseball community has been, I can't believe we didn't do this earlier.
Right.
Because it's been so good, and I think in hockey, just imagine the excitement of it. A single game, and people say, yeah, but one game, what does it really mean? Well, sometimes the entire 82 game season comes down to one game on a Sunday afternoon anyway. So why not? It could happen anyway. Let's just go ahead and schedule it.
Yeah, wouldn't you rather have the one game that it comes down to be, not you trying to figure out if a Minnesota Wild team that's already clinched the playoffs is going to play their best goalie against the team you're battling to get, I'd rather have you play the team, play against the team that you're going to, instead of sitting there scoreboard watching, and at the end of the season we have all the shams of teams who are, I mean, what was it? Was it the Devils who got in that one, or let somebody in that one year because they didn't play Brodeur?
It was Toronto. It was
right.
It was New Jersey and the Islanders, and the Islanders or New Jersey played their backup goaltender, and Wayne Dublovitz stopped New Jersey in the shootout, and the Islanders beat out the Leafs by 1 point to make the playoffs. Well, the thing is, it's like if you think about it, right now, the regular season ends usually on a Sunday.
Yep.
The playoffs usually start on a Wednesday. You could have say an 8 versus 9 in the East on a Monday, an 8 versus 9 in the West on a Tuesday, and then the playoffs starting Wednesday or Thursday, and you have consistent programming throughout. And essentially, and as you saw last night with the Oakland-Kansas City game, it's sort of the excitement of a Game 7. It's a one-game elimination, winner takes all. You throw out the regular season overtime rules, and you bring in the playoff overtime rules, so it could be sudden death, and I think it'll be phenomenal.
Oh, yeah, and I agree. And think about it, people are saying, oh, well, the regular season doesn't matter because of this. Like you made the argument, Kevin, but I can make the argument that actually makes the regular season matter even a little bit more, because now if you're the 8th place team, you really want to get into that 7th slot to get in, and if you're the 10th or 11th or 12th place team, you still have a shot,
Couldn't agree more. I mean, I thought it was a good idea. When I heard it for the first time, but it's certainly not going to happen. At least not in the next few years. I don't think there's any drumbeat for it. But it's low-hanging fruit if they want to just create a little more revenue. If things get a little stale and they want to spice it up, they can go to this, and to create more interest. I mean, the whole idea is to keep teams interested or fans interested as long as possible, and this adds another team to the mix. And usually the difference between the 7, 8, and 9 isn't that significant anyway. So those teams all deserve to be right in that situation.
No, you're right, and they're all in that boat. I agree with you completely, and it gives, like this year in the Western Conference, it is so difficult. I was watching the Winnipeg Jets play the other night, and I was actually impressed. I'm like, this team is better than I thought they were. Some of these young players are coming to age. They're starting to get some speed. Jacob Trouba's the real deal. Watching this team play, and I'm thinking, but they're not going to make the playoffs in the West. You're looking back, as good as they're getting, in my mind, they might make the playoffs, but give them a shot. Give them another shot. I guess you could make the argument that the Western Conference is so good, and in the Eastern Conference there'll be a team that would make it at 9th that would probably be not. I don't. It's hard to tell. Are you putting teams in? But at the end of the day, I mean, if you're the 8th seed, it's not like you blew the doors off. Having to play one more game to get into the playoffs is not punishment in my mind.
Especially in the West, it's reward. So
yeah, it's totally reward.
I think it gives the first place team, the team that wins the first in each conference, a little more of an advantage because that 8th place team is coming in just a little more tired playing an extra game. Plus, I mean, and I agree with Kevin's, what Kevin said regarding this isn't going to happen in the next couple years, but it would seem to be a winner from the league point of view, from the television point of view, and from the PA point of view in terms of additional revenue, because you're selling a playoff game to, say NBC and Sportsnet in Canada. That's additional programming that's probably, and I don't know if it would be folded into the already signed agreements, but if it's not, and you could sell it outside as, like Major League Baseball has the wild card games on TBS.
Right.
I think that's the only thing that they have with TBS, and so that's an additional contract, an additional money coming in. So anything that brings in more revenue, there you go.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. Well, last night we had some preseason games, and I know that your favorite thing to talk about, Kevin, is preseason hockey. So I thought we would. Yeah. I know you're a preseason purist. The more the merrier. But I attended a game last night, which was really. I just had to bring up. There was a couple controversies about this, and I do want to get into the Ice Girl thing because as much as I don't know how I even stand on this issue, I'm totally confused by it, and I want to get your opinions on it. But it was definitely a scenario in Philly that was a little bit weird because for those of you who aren't following this, the Flyers got rid of their Ice Girls, and in the first home preseason game, these guys in very bright orange sweaters came out and swept up, which has been happening in other cities for a long time. I mean, are there Ice Girls in Detroit, Kevin?
No. No, there's no Ice Girls in Detroit.
There's none in Buffalo either, Mike.
There are female sweepers, but they're not dressed as cheerleaders. They're dressed as workers.
Right. And this is in that there's been a lot of lawsuits. There's a lot of controversy going on about the Ice Girls, and and it is ridiculous the outfits that they wear, and I completely think it's very demeaning to women. But the Flyers' answer to this was to just get rid of them altogether. The fans freaked out. So last night, when this group is skating onto the ice, the boos come out again. The Flyers fans are booing the ice guys, essentially every time they come out, and they continued all night last night to boo them every time they came out. You guys, having been at the draft, you can imagine what this is like. So they're booing them. They come out there, but on the board, on the big board, it comes up. You spoke. We listened, and then really like the one outfit that the Flyers Ice Girls had that was the most scantily, like 4 girls skate across in that outfit, and it's like the Ice Girls are back opening night, and auditions this Sunday at the practice facility. And then there was something like under the breath, like Ice Girls will be dressed more appropriately, or something. It was like a small listed that you sort of heard, but people were freaking out. They still booed the Ice guys every time they came out after that. I think they thought that might end it, but that didn't. But anyway, so now are the Flyers at fault for getting rid of the Ice Girls in the first place and just not putting them in something more appropriate? Are they at fault for bringing them back because the fans wanted them? I mean, Mike. Anything? Anybody want to touch this with a 10-foot pole? I guess I should say.
Well, okay. I mean, you're probably the teams are in difficult situations because whichever way they go, they're going to probably offend somebody. The only way that I think they don't offend is if they have Ice Girls and they have them dressed non-provocatively. I mean, I know that in Chicago, one of the things that was going on was that I don't remember how they were dressed, but, the stripper song was going on during...
Yeah, that didn't help, I mean, let's throw that out there.
Don't get me wrong. I mean, I enjoy the beauty of a young lady who is, I'm sorry, that's just me.
Shame on you.
I understand the objectification of somebody and how that can offend someone. So there's a happy medium. If you want to have Ice Girls, fine. You just can't have them in bikinis, or you can't have them in, tight spandex that, leaves nothing to the imagination. Just have them dressed relatively normally, and I don't think females will have a problem, and I think males will be sufficiently pleased.
As I'm watching this, I'm thinking to myself, this is another throwing snowballs at Santa Claus moment for the Philadelphia crowd. Like, I'm thinking this is right up there. Kevin, throw to you reluctantly, if anything.
This is two things. One, by coincidence, this morning while I was out, I heard a discussion on Sports Talk Radio about, and I live in Detroit, and they were talking about the toughest places that Detroit fans have ever had to go to watch their team on the road. Mm-hmm. And you can guess where the toughest place was. By far, it wasn't even close. Wow. And that was Philadelphia. And Mike Stone, who is a Detroit radio host, is from Philadelphia. And he talked about, and there was an interesting discussion about how Philadelphia fans, that now their legacy of being tough on in terms of their booing, and has become such a legacy that the fans today almost feel like they have to live up to that reputation. Like,
Yeah.
when they given the opportunity, they got to boo lustily.
They take it as a challenge. That's what they.
That's exactly right. They want to maintain that reputation. They don't want to let the previous generation down, who earned who threw the snowball. But by the way, when I told that story once in a story that I wrote about fans, and I got 2 or 3 letters from people who chastised me for bringing that up, saying that's overblown and it's often viewed as a sign of how rough Philadelphia fans are, and it's really not what it was. But anyway.
Yeah, speaking as a Philadelphia fan, real quickly on that, I do agree that it's overblown, but I also will tell you this, that there is a very distinctive difference between the fans in this city from team to team. Like the Eagles are they are their own entity, and the Flyers fans are not Eagles fans, and I mean, I'm sure the Flyers fans are rooting for the Eagles fans, but the fans that you think of with the Eagles fans, those you won't see them. I don't know, you won't see them in this. You wouldn't see them in the spectrum before. I mean, the Flyers were a tough team, and I think that also plays into this whole thing. But Flyers fans, I've seen. I mean, I remember Mario Lemieux coming back here after, and that was an unbelievable, touching moment where this cancer skates around the ice with a huge round of ovation. I mean, this is I
was at that game. I remember that they treated them well. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is a city that Flyers fans are very different than Eagles fans from that perspective. But go on, Kevin. Sorry.
Yeah, well, and then just the second thing, this is an issue that goes way beyond hockey. Obviously, it's a society problem. Everybody's struggling with political correctness as well. There's people on both sides of that. I mean, I agree pretty much with what Mike said. I'm certainly not opposed to having an all-female ice girl group sweep the ice, but they need to be dressed appropriately. I don't think that's asking too much, to do that. So, and responding to fans, well, that's the difficult issue here. Like, on one hand, you want to applaud a team that tries to see what the fans want, tries to give it to them. On the other hand, is this an issue you really wanted to do that on? So.
Yeah, this is the weird thing. I mean, and yeah, I agree. And this is an all-age event. That's the thing about this. You've got a lot of kids there, and that's the tough part for this too. It's not just guys. It's not just demeaned women. There's a whole bunch of things that come about, and whatever your opinions are on basically things like that, it's very complicated. I think the NHL though might have to come out with some sort of a statement on this and some sort of a way of saying, okay, this is what is acceptable and this is what's not acceptable. The NHL usually has their hand in every little aspect of everything, and for some reason this ice girl thing I think they've stayed away from, probably for legal reasons or whatever, just to keep themselves clear of it. I think it would be better if the NHL had put it together standards for this. I'm not saying it should be at the next competition committee meeting, but I'm saying there should be something that they actually try to figure out here.
And in the wake of everything that's the public embarrassment and everything that's gone on with the NFL lately, not to say that the ice girl debate has anything to do with domestic violence, but I think professional sports have to be a lot more careful in terms of what they let their teams do, whether it's penalizing players or whether they have presentations at the arena that might be offensive, and the NHL should get on top of it and have a uniform policy regarding that.
One of the most offensive things about this whole thing, I talked to an ice girl about this because I was curious. I know a couple ice girls and who follow us on HockeyBuzz or follow me on Twitter, and I talked to one, and she said the most offensive thing is the fact that these girls basically got fired because they were being put in costumes that were too exposing. Like that was the weirdest thing when you think about it. Not bringing them back. I mean, this is a job, right? They get paid for this. So you're saying because we dressed you too scantily, we're not going to have you anymore here, and that's why I think just going to the more appropriate uniforms was a better answer, and that's where I think the Flyers made their mistake here. And I think that's hopefully what's going to happen. But we'll get off that now, and I think we handled that without anybody getting in too much trouble. It's a tough issue, and it's got so many levels to it. It's a whole show in a different world that you guys don't want to watch. So let's go to Josh. Josh, what do we have news-wise?
Well, I think the big news right now, guys, is what's happening with Mike Babcock. I know a lot of people in Detroit in the last couple days continue to tweet about him and Ken Holland and contract negotiations. They apparently talked contract yesterday. Chances of a deal before the season appear to be fading. Some people think a deal can be done. Some people think it can't be done. I'm curious to see, is Babcock willing, I think, to leave a little money on the table and stay in Detroit? Because he honestly, in my opinion, is the biggest free agent this coming summer. Because I think there's a lot of teams that'd be willing to pay him pretty damn good money to be their head coach and maybe get some management responsibility as well.
What do you think, Kev, on this one?
Yeah, this is a very complicated, multi-layered story. Because he clearly, I surveyed at the NHL media event in New York. I surveyed 28 of the top players in the league, and almost 50% of them said that Mike Babcock was the best coach in the league. He's got a Stanley Cup, he's got a World Championship, he's got 2 Olympic gold medals, reputation for being the most well-prepared coach in the league in terms of having his team ready to play. That's saying something because there's some really quality coaches here. On the other hand, he's difficult to play for. He's can be hard on players, and the guys who do play him don't always love the experience. So it's very complicated, and I think he's a little bit hard on management as well, just because he has earned the right by his success to be demanding. The Red Wings also have a coach waiting in the wings in Jeff Blasel, who's a good young coach who they think is going to be a great coach. Now, saying all that, I think they want him back for sure. I think Ken Holland is making an earnest effort to get him back. And I think Mike Babcock realizes the position he's in, just as Josh articulately stated. He is the best free agent next summer. I don't think there's any question about that. And I think he's curious to play it out, to see what happens. I think he wants to come back. I think he believes he's going to come back. But I think he'd sort of like to see what's out there. I think he'd it's not going to bother him to let this go, because as he said earlier in the fall, he's pretty confident in his own abilities. So if it doesn't get done here, I don't think he's going to worry about it. And I think the Red Wings have recognized the position and I don't think they're going to worry about it.
Josh?
2 things for you, Kevin. Number one, if Babcock does stay in Detroit, do you agree that he will be leaving some money on the table? Because you got to think there's going to be some teams willing to pay money. And number 2, there's been speculation across the NHL from various writers, bloggers, that Mike Babcock makes Ken Holland's job a little tough, because a lot of players, like you said, there's a lot of players that don't like him, and it makes his job tough when he's trying to recruit players to bring them to come and play in Detroit.
Yeah, I think those are 2 really good questions. With regard to the money, Mike Ilitch, the owner there, has never let money stand in the way of getting who he wants. I think Joel Quenneville's the highest paid coach now, and I would assume Mike Babcock wants to be the highest paid coach, and I'm assuming the Red Wings will do that. I mean, I don't have any inside knowledge on that, but I'm guessing that's the way contracts work. Some guy establishes it, and then you go a little above him. So he's got to probably be looking north of $3 million. So how much would Toronto give him if they're going to? Probably more than that if they're going to fire Carlisle. So probably he will leave money on the table if he comes back to Detroit, because somebody out there probably would be willing to overpay to get him to come there. With regard to whether or not players don't come here because of Babcock, that's been a discussion point this summer in Detroit. A lot of people have talked about it. I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue in Detroit right now that I don't want to say discourages, but puts the Red Wings lower on the free agent list than they've been in the past, is the fact that no one knows where the Red Wings are right now. Right. They were good for a lot of years, and now what we see is a couple of really talented older players in Zetterberg and Datsuk, and some really good young players. But no one's really sure how good this team is. Right. And in a free agent world now, it's such a limited opportunity for free agents. You don't know how many times you're going to be in that position. You want to go to a place you can win right away, and the Red Wings are not on that list now. So I think that's what's the issue, why they were not able to land top free agents. But the guys who played for Babcock at the Olympic Games, who had him short term, they love him. Mm-hmm. I've talked to numerous guys, and they really think the world of him. And most of the guys that don't enjoy the Babcock experience begrudgingly admit that he knows what he's doing in a big way.
Yeah.
And there's always been a comparison to Scotty Bowman, but the comparison really doesn't work because Scotty never really communicated with players. So you could say, well, I'm in Scotty's doghouse, but what that meant was your ice time was cut. But it's not like he hauled you into the office and dressed you down. Well, Mike Babcock will do that. There are certainly stories circulating of him dressing down players that if you're not playing well, he lets you know. So I think there is a difference there, and for players, I think that's a big difference.
It seems like to me, and I'll let you go, Mike, after this, that the top free agents wouldn't be an issue whatsoever because everything I've heard of Babcock, and I might be wrong here, is that if you're, a top two-line player, you're okay. You're going to be pretty good. It seems like the players that we have trouble with are not the kind of guys that we're trying to go get necessarily. Am I right about that?
Well, I know what you're. In terms of ice time, that's true. Like he lets his top two lines do what they want to do, but top players struggle with him.
Okay.
Just his tactics are just tough. And it's really, it's no different than in any industry where you have some bosses that are harder to work for than others, and Mike's in that list.
Right, Mike.
Well, I mean, I think at the center of all this, questioning of whether he's going to stay there or not is what Kevin said. You've got a Detroit team that has an aging core. And unrestricted free agency is I think is dying in the NHL, where you're not going to be able to get impact players to replace a player like Datsuk, who I believe is 37 years old. Zetterberg is in his mid-30s. All their core forwards have had major injury problems. They're having a tough time replacing those guys. And maybe he's just reading the landscape and seeing, okay, this team is on the decline. I have a chance to go out and make the most money someplace else. I've got my resume is top notch in the league, and maybe he's been there for 9 years. Maybe he just thinks it's time to move on. The thing is, I'll go against the conventional wisdom here when it comes to him coming to Toronto. I mean, maybe he will, but I don't know if he's going to have any more success than Randy Carlyle has. If you look at Randy Carlyle's resume, he won a Stanley Cup. He hasn't won Olympic championships, but he's been pretty respected until coming to Toronto and having his reputation sullied of being one of the top coaches in the league. And his problem is he can't get his top six players to buy in to what he needs them to play to win effectively and consistently. So why would Mike Babcock have any more success teaching Phil Kessel how to play two-way or having Joffrey Lupul or Nazem Kadri play two-way? I don't think he would, because I think that's inherent in those players and not the fault of the coach.
Don't know. It's a tough one. Gabby, you have a question on that? Thought on that?
Well, that is interesting because you'd be coming in Toronto with one style of coach that's the same as the one you just gotten rid of. I mean, Carlisle built to play for as well, but there are different styles. Like I view Carlisle as more of an old school coach who motivates. Where I think Babcock is pretty modern in his approach. He's a guy that gets in the office at 7 a.m. and he's a film guy, breaking them down, exploiting matchups. I mean, I think they're different enough where I don't know. My gut feeling is that Babcock's a better coach than Carlisle, but I can't argue your point. He won a Stanley Cup. There are guys who swore by Carlisle. Brian Burke loved Carlisle, and he had him certainly in both places. So, and look, we're all just speculating anyway. I mean, if Toronto makes the playoffs and has a good run, I don't believe that's going to happen. But if it does, But here's the other bigger question. I mean, will we see teams, move their coach out to get a shot at Babcock?
Right.
I think that's a possibility. For sure. I mean, he's a pretty engaging guy too. Like, I think he would be fascinating in a place where you're still trying to sell the game. I mean, because he can be pretty interesting. And there's always news when Babcock's your coach.
Here's a spot that would be fascinating in Brooklyn. Like think about where the Islanders are, right now, and they've got a new ownership coming in, and you're not trying to sell the game there because the Islanders fans are good fans, but that's a good young team, some superstar players that haven't yet come to fruition. Going to be a lot of excitement when they move. That would be a fun place to watch him play, to watch him coach. I mean, in my opinion, that would be one option. So. But yeah, here's another from last night. Here's a little highlight goal. This was my favorite goal from last night. It is preseason hockey, but this was worth watching. So I don't know if you guys saw this or not, but this is the Johnny Gaudreau goal, and this is really this confirms my belief that Johnny Gaudreau is the left-handed Patrick Kane, because this is absolutely a Patrick Kane goal. The cut back and the swing back to the opposite side on the goalie. That's just. I love this kid. I'm really looking forward to him in the NHL.
Yeah, I'm a Johnny Gaudreau guy. I think when you watch what he did at the World Championships against NHL players, coming right out of college, like nobody does that. Like I pay attention to the World Championships, and they always bring some college guys in, and nobody steps in and does what he did. He was among the leading scorers, the top performers on the team. And I think the Kane comparison is a decent one. I think he's sort of a mix. He's a little bit of a poor man's Paul Kariya too.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that.
Not quite the skater, but
right.
Certainly the quick release and the smaller guy that somehow gets sort of lost in the creases of the defense, and next thing you know, he's in. And he takes advantage. He's very opportunistic. When he gets his chances, he buries it, and sneaky good shot. So it's going to be interesting to see what he's able to do. But he's a guy that's going to have a good playmaker. So they're going to have to find a good line for him.
Yeah, that's the big thing. I mean, Monahan, I guess I've heard is possible. He's obviously a talented kid too. But yeah, I agree. I just think that he's just shown to be such a clutch scorer. That reminds me of Kane. There's a little bit of Theo Fleury in him. Obviously, when you see a guy that size in Calgary running around, but not to the point where Fleury was a different kind of player. But just the speed. I see the little Danny Briere in him too. That you have that kind of shot. That's a Danny Briere type shot there, and when Briere was in his prime. So I just. And Calgary has definitely done their best to sort of downplay it. They've really kind of said, well, we're not sure if he's going to be here. He's going to be there. Don't you think he's going to be there?
I do. I think you got to give him a shot, and let's get him started. He's a little older than obviously than a Canadian CHL player, so let's get him rolling and get him accustomed to the game. He's going to have some growing pains, and he's the one thing about him is he's not very strong, so he will get pushed around a little bit, and he's going to have to increase his strength to survive. But he'll do that. I mean, most of the smaller players learn pretty quickly, and it's almost self-preservation that they go to the weight room every day.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. And speaking of another thing I wanted to bring up is one of the things I'm doing. A couple people in the chat room have had this, and somebody just got it. So I was going to say what I'm doing is I'm going through the history of video hockey games on my back screens. Yesterday we had the original Atari 2600 hockey game, which you remember was just two stick-like block figures skating around. This is one of the first arcade hockey games, and this is this is called Hit the Ice. It's not Face Off. A couple people have tried to guess, but this was Hit the Ice. Hit the Ice was a classic in the arcade. Sort of, I mean, graphically was okay, but very violent, very violent game. This is the Reds versus the Blues because they didn't have any NHL. They were just colors. They didn't have any NHL endorsement deals or anything like that. And there was definitely a lot of there was blood on the ice when guys got in fights. This was good. This was good old-fashioned, don't care about the kids, video hockey game. So that's Hit the Ice. But it brings up another thing that I wanted to talk about in those terms is that EA Sports did their predictions. I don't know if you saw this or not, but EA Sports had their game play out, and I want to do this myself because I don't believe they're being honest with us on this one, because they have. If you saw the way the playoff bracket went in this thing, it's an annual thing they do with the NHL, and trying to find the actual playoff brackets. I had it a second ago, but basically, it has the Kings beating the Bruins for the Stanley Cup. And throughout the whole thing, it has basically the 7 teams, the 8 teams we all think were probably the 5 teams from the Central, the 3 from the Pacific, and making the playoffs, and all the teams in the East are basically the same. And whenever I've played out these video game seasons, it's never like that. It's always wacky and weird. This is really like someone actually just laid it out as this is how it's going to go, because it's like the Kings are beating the Hawks in the finals 4-3. So we're going to play this out tomorrow on that same game that they did and see what happens. And I'll just give you the results because I won't bore you with the entire season, of course. But
How long will that take, Eck?
it'll take about 30 seconds. Yeah, they just go right through it.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, it computes everything. It comes down to it actually will give you the Vezina winner. It'll give you the Lady Byng. It gave Patrick Kane the Lady Byng award. Oliver Ekman-Larsson, the Norris, goes through the whole thing, and it does the entire thing. It will give you the stats for every team in depth. It's amazing. It just plays it bam, and based on all these factors and all these things, pretty cool. I mean, but I've done this many times before, and I've never gotten anything close to what you would normally see predicted by like the Hockey News, or whatever, as a final. It had Tampa and Boston in the conference final, which I guess is a little bit bold, but
not really.
Not crazy bold,
No,
I mean,
Everybody's taking Tampa.
Yeah.
And Boston is a perennial leader in the Eastern Conference, so that's not exactly bold. To me, would be taking a Philadelphia or a Rangers or something like that. I mean, even though the Rangers made the finals last year, I don't think a lot of people were expecting them to come back and repeat. I mean, that would be bold, but I think the predictions have pretty much been sort of boilerplate. They've been pretty much.
But is it possible for Tampa to beat Boston in the finals, in the conference finals? I was trying to how this playoff system works.
They played in the finals they played in the Eastern Conference finals in 2011.
Now the new playoff system. Doesn't the new playoff system prohibit that from happening? Because they'd be in the same division, right? So
yeah, that's
true. Would be finishing second or third, or Boston would be finishing first. And doesn't the winner of the second or third team, wouldn't they play Boston if Boston won? Confused.
Yeah, they could only that could only work if they finish like 5th.
Right, they have to finish.
Move over. They have to move over to the other.
Right.
Over the other conference. So.
Which I guess is what happened. I don't know. Maybe they have the wrong. Maybe they don't. Maybe EA Sports doesn't even know how the playoff system works. But.
What's interesting about the playoff race? I was thinking about this morning, and I was on a radio show. And we've talked about this before, about it doesn't feel like anybody's going to supplant any of the last year's playoff teams in the West. But if you had to pick a vulnerable team in the West, and I just forced you to put a gun to your head, who is it? Is it Minnesota? Is it Dallas? Now, if I say the same thing in the East, other than Tampa Bay in Boston, don't you think everybody else is vulnerable in some ways?
Yeah, for sure.
Like even Pittsburgh. I mean, I still like them. I still think they're, a good team. But I still, if someone said to me, I think they're vulnerable. I don't know what's going to happen there. They got a new coach. Things are different. What kind of year is Fleury going to have? Is Malkin's injury? What's going to happen there? I can make a case for vulnerability there.
Everybody's got a flaw. Everybody's got an imperfection in the East. I mean, Pittsburgh, Malkin, the questions about Fleury, the Rangers, Stepan's injury, Stanley Cup hangover. Everybody has something that is
except Boston or Tampa Bay.
Except Boston and Tampa, and God forbid if Stamkos goes down or if Bishop gets hurt again, Drouin has already had his injury, but I mean, if something like that happens, you can't foresee injuries. If that happens, then they're in the mix like everybody else as well.
Yeah.
I wanted to give you a question, Kevin. I'll give you a second to think about this while I do the next story, because one thing we did while you were away was we had the Most Improved Player award that we sort of picked, and Most Improved being that. And I would like to know if in your mind, and you don't have to answer today. You can answer tomorrow if you like. But the idea is, give us a player who played, Stamkos excluded because he played only a few games, who played, let's say, 50 games last year, who's going to score more points this year than he did last year by the most of any player in the NHL. Essentially, the player who's going to improve the most. And also, by that token, the coach who has taken over a new team who's going to get the biggest point increase.
I can answer both those right now.
All right, go ahead.
Nikushkin in Dallas.
Nice.
And I think Barry Trotz is going to do wonders in Washington. So.
Yeah, I like it. I'm the big Nikushkin fan too.
Me too. Yeah.
That kid is crazy talented, and he's like a poor man's Malkin sort of to a degree, but has that ability. Might be just
I mean, I think he's going to score 25 to 30 goals this year.
Yeah.
A lot would depend on which line he ends up with, but he is a skilled guy. I see him at 55 points, maybe somewhere in there, maybe more.
Yeah.
Imagine him playing with Sagan and Jamie Benn. I mean, that's insane. That's one of the best lines.
Well, that power play they can put together is insane. I mean, the power play and I watched the other night. I was talking to Bill Meltzer, and he said they were loading up. One of the things they were really rough was doing was loading up the power play with all and one of the lines was basically just that was all their big players. They had Spezza with Sagan and Ben or something like that, and the power play. I mean, that power play is as good as any power play. I mean, just.
I think they were using 4 forwards, Zach. I think they were either using Hemsky or Ben on the point, and
that's without Nikushkin even on the ice. That's the crazy thing. I mean, that's how good that team is. They can put that together. I mean, that's absolutely nuts. Well, the Toronto Maple Leafs, Mike, are going to be giving away 200 tickets. Did you see this?
I did not.
For every game.
Giving away.
Yes,
wow.
Giving away. Ford, Motors, it's got a long last. I guess the renewed there. I'll read a little bit of the story. This story comes to us from the Toronto Maple Leafs website. So basically, it says so Ford Motors renewed a 5-year partnership with MLSC and is the new Leafs Nation ticket program, which will award more than 9,000 free tickets to Leafs home games throughout the course of the 2014-15 NHL season. And each year of its 5-year partnership, the innovative programs will grant unprecedented access to Leaf fans across the Greater Toronto Area with the opportunity to watch games live inside the Air Canada Centre and newly designed. I'm trying to figure out, for each Leaf game, 200 tickets will be made available to the public at no cost. Fans can win tickets so it's basically a ticket contest, right? So it's a ticket contest for Ford. But that's
that's very
kind of significant because you know how difficult it is to get tickets to that building. That's why I thought it was kind of.
And I think that's the whole point. They realize that the ticket price in and of itself at the box office is the highest in the league, and then when the entrepreneurs outside the secondary market gets a hold of them, if you want to get a single ticket for a game at the Air Canada Centre, it's going to run you at least over $100, maybe even more. So yeah, this is a way to get people who can't afford to get into those games, and that is a good thing. I know that one of the things that was being talked about, and there was an article in the Globe and Mail this morning in Canada about Maple Leaf Square, where the Legends Row is being assembled, was going to be sponsored by Ford. It was going to be called Ford Square, but they changed that. I'm not sure because of the negative connotation of the current mayor of Toronto, or the mayor who just resigned, Rob Ford. But it's now still going to be called Maple Leaf Square. Apparently, they reversed course and changed their mind in terms of the sponsorship. I think it's going to be sponsored by Ford, but it'll still be called Maple Leaf Square.
Right. And finally, from my side, and let's see if Josh has any news after this. Last night, were you following what was happening last night with the Islanders and MSG and the NHL Network? This was a really fascinating thing. The game was supposed to be on NHL Network and had been promoted as an NHL Network game for a long time to Islanders fans. And then MSG, who has the rights for the Islanders normally, decided that even though they weren't going to televise the game, they weren't going to let the NHL Network televise it either. And so the game was just not on. And so it was they would not allow it, and it went crazy. And the Islanders fans went berserk, of course, as they should. And what's funny is, and so I'm going to read you the opening blog of Dan, the opening paragraph of Dan Pietru's blog, who's our Islanders writer, which is absolutely hilarious. And Dan did a great job with this. So this is how he opens it. Let me bring it up right now. So he says, last night was a microcosm of what it feels like to be an Islanders fan. The night started off in grand fashion. The team promoted all day long that the game would be televised on the NHL Network. However, in typical fashion, our friends at MSG Network decided not to broadcast the game and would not allow the blackout rules on the game to be lifted. When 7 p.m. rolled around, Islanders fans were left in the dark. However, we Islanders fans did what we do best. We whined, harassed, and complained for 2 periods, and then somehow the blackout rules were lifted just in time to see our beloved team blow a 2-goal lead. Thankfully, the Islanders rebounded and to score a couple and win 5-3. But if we can get measly blackout rules lifted, Islanders fans together, we can take over the world. I would think the sentence would be followed by some kind of evil laugh. So that was Dan's article. There you go.
And ironically, this happens on the day that there was a ruling regarding blackout rules being negated for the NFL, which we still don't know whether that's going to have any effect on, the NHL and the Game Center and Center Ice package. But
and that's what I'm working on this big. Like I said before, I'm working on a really big article. I've been going down into talking to the NHL about this whole blackout rule thing and the ridiculousness of it, and what Rogers is doing, where they're allowing people who get Game Center to see their home games now, but Comcast is not doing this. This whole thing's crumbling before our eyes, and there needs to be a new paradigm. Basically, we need it because there's always ways for people to get games, and I just thought it was really interesting that midway through a game they changed their minds on this. I've never seen that before. I mean, if you're an Islanders fan, how do you even react to that? How do you find out the game is suddenly on? I mean, you've gone over there, you're like, it's not on. This brings up from now on, when a game's blacked out, you're going to have to keep checking back every 5 seconds. I mean, what do you think of the whole blackout thing, Kevin?
Oh, I've never liked the whole situation, and even going back, this goes back to the Blackhawks. Remember, that's how far the league has come. It wasn't that long ago that the Blackhawks weren't televising their home games. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So, to me, when you're still trying to expand the way the NHL is, you need liberal blackout rules. You need to get as many games on as possible. Let the fans see the sport.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And we're living in an age where there's a realistic expectation that the only reason you're not televising the game is because you're a jerk. Because we know now that everything's being filmed. It's not like there's not a crew there. It's not like there's not the abilities to do so. So people, there used to be all this. Well, we don't send a crew to the. It doesn't happen anymore. Josh, last little bit. What do you got?
I just wanted to point out a nice article written by Pierre LeBrun, basically on George McPhee and Ray Shero and how they, unlike any other beginning of NHL season, they're both on the sidelines without jobs. I want to point out if there is a firing, if there is a general manager change, you got to think one of these two guys is next in line. And I want to ask you guys, who gets the job first, and what general manager right now would be on the hot seat?
Well, I think Ray Shero would get the first job, but generally we don't see GMs whacked mid-season. Yeah. We see that in the postseason. So I'm not so sure. I think we're going to see those guys sitting out all year, and then there'll be several jobs next summer. But Shero at least has had success where George McPhee is a guy that I like a lot. Really is sort of associated with a team that never lived up to expectations. So just based on reputation, although I bet George, might be able to knock him dead in an interview, so you never know.
Yeah, you never know. That's a very good point. We got to go, but I wanted to throw this out there too. That you got to check out I was reading your 10 tips for fantasy hockey draft, Kevin. I love them. They're really good on.
Well, I appreciate that. We're actually USA Today is starting a fantasy website as well, where all sports, and we'll do hockey as well, and everybody's always looking for new ways to reach readers, and that's ours. We're going to have our own website.
I love it. I mean, this is these are really interesting tips because they're not what you're seeing everywhere else. And I'm going to do a blog later today that's going to link to this, and also link to Eric Duhashik's list that he put out yesterday, which is always one of my favorites. Duhashik is a very good fantasy guy.
He does a good job.
He's got a great list too, but some of these are really fascinating. So you can check it out at USA Today. Just go to the sports section, and you'll see it comes right up in the NHL. But yeah, it's definitely worth a listen, and a look. for now. You can listen to Kevin here again tomorrow. All right. So, guys, thanks for watching. As always, please subscribe. Tomorrow we're going to be previewing the Pacific Division. We'll also be joined by Ryan Garner, who formerly our San Jose guy, now living a happy life in Jamaica. But he'll be joining us to talk a little bit about the Pacific Division. And remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. Talk to you then.